Great. Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss resume and LinkedIn tips to advance your career. I'm Amy Goldstein, Chair of Training Programs for the Legal Mentor Network and founder of Grayson Allen, an executive legal search and career consulting company.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mosa Fernandez Goodman. I am the founder of a firm called Top Talent Advocates, which essentially serves as a sports agency for executives and attorneys. You can check us out at www.toptalentadvocates.com, but I'm really excited to partner with Amy. And Amy, thanks so much for the invite to share some tips on LinkedIn and resume development.
Thanks, Mosa. We're thrilled to have you joining us today. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Legal Mentor Network is a new nonprofit organization focused on providing free legal mentoring to law students and junior attorneys. You can find information not only about the organization, but also about how to sign up as a mentor or a mentee at our website, legalmentornetwork.org. So we're going to start with resumes and then move on to LinkedIn. Feel free to put your questions in the Q&A as we go along. We will take them when possible, and we will then also, of course, leave time at the end. So, how do we get started? As Nike says, just do it. Don't worry about it being pretty, what it looks like on the page. The first step in getting your resume done is getting the information out there. Where you went to school, internships you've done, who your employers have been if you have worked, and then what your responsibilities are, were, any skills that you have. Just get it all on the page. It is much easier to remove things than to figure out what you're leaving out.
I think, Amy, one of the things people get a little hung up on is the format and structure, to your point, before they even have content. So to Amy's point, I think it's really imperative that everyone get the content down, and the format that you need for your resume can take a number of different structures. People have preferences about what makes them feel good. So I think Amy's point is should be heeded by all, and content over format to get started.
Thanks, Mosa. And what I've brought up on the screen now is a sample. There are, on the web, you can find thousands of formats for resumes. You do want to pick something that is relatively simple. It is still a conservative industry. You want it to be easy to read. This is just one example. As I said, there are many choices, but the ability for it to be just a quick read is very important. And Mosa, we've talked about the impact of artificial intelligence reading resumes. Can you just give us a little insight into what you've shared with me about fonts and the point size and those kinds of things, since they are a driver for some position submissions now?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Happy to. For those of you on the training who have heard of the term applicant tracking systems, or ATS, or as Amy referred to it as the artificial intelligence, those are all sort of behind the scenes factors that can work to help or hinder you in your application process when you're submitting online. Now, that's not just for job boards, LinkedIn, Indeed, Go In-House, any of those job boards, but also similar to what a firm would use, a company uses in their HR department, or what some recruiting systems are based on, right? So if you submit your resume to a recruiting firm, all of the sort of algorithms that work in the background kind of get lumped together and described as ATS. And just two quick, simple points. There's a lot of language out there about this. Is the two most recognizable fonts by applicant tracking systems as of last year are Times New Roman or Calibri. They trade off 1 and 2 depending on how you look at sort of the ratings and reviews. And typically you want to be able to have your font be in size 10 or higher. Obviously, your resume, the goal is to have it read by a human. So some people like me don't have the best vision anymore. So if you can get to 11 or 12 without compromising content, the larger the font, the better. Please keep in mind, don't write in the white space. There's some old school ways of trying to trick applicant tracking systems by actually typing in white font. You don't want to do that. That's now detectable by a lot of applicant tracking systems, and you'll get sort of booted from the system. So just make sure that what you're putting into your resume is either in Times New Roman or Calibri, font size 10 or higher, and that you're starting to use keywords in job descriptions. If you look at the job description to which you're applying, I think what you're going to find is that there's often terminology that is synonymous with some of the items on your resume. So for example, leadership and management sometimes get used interchangeably. If you're applying to a specific job and you have the time to take and dedicate to customizing your resume, I'd encourage you to consider using the words that's in the job description, because that's only going to help with your ranking in the applicant tracking systems. Ultimately, ATS, or the artificial intelligence, is only a part of the process. Sometimes it's a game that you have to play. The ultimate goal is obviously to have your resume reviewed by a human who has the ability to hire you, but hopefully that's some insight into what's going on today.
Thanks, Mosa. And just to go back to one of the things that you just said, I always encourage people to use the job description and the language that's in it to the extent they can to guide language in the resume. You don't want to lift things necessarily word for word, and it is tedious, but it is much easier if you draw the parallel for the reader than make them guess at whether your language is indicating that you're doing what they're asking you to do. It is much easier for you to tweak your language up front and let the reader know off the bat that you're doing the things that they have as required or requested skills in their description. A couple of other things just about format. This resume that I have on the screen right now has the experience first, followed by education. One of those two should be the lead. Occasionally I see bar admissions come first. That should be third. If you are still a student, certainly education can come before experience. And even when you're a very junior attorney, that is fine. But at some point, once you start working, your experience should be the lead. Keep in mind that this is a marketing tool, and that what is most important to the person hiring is what should come first. After experience and education, in whichever order, and then bar admissions, you can include volunteer experience, publications and speaking. If you do have any publications or speaking engagements, those certainly can come before a volunteer. And then if you do have room, you can add interest. I would encourage you to pick things that are going to foster conversation. And if you're filling the page, interest is something that can drop off as you need more room for your actual experience. It really is secondary and not something that you should worry about trying to fit in once your experience is enough that, again, that you're filling the page.
And just one more thing to piggyback on some of the great points that Amy made there. Your resume is a living, breathing document. Throughout your career, I know this is focused on folks 5 years or less outside of law school, but your experience and the sophistication of your work is going to change over time. So please make sure that you are revisiting your resume over time, probably annually, if you're the type of person who likes to keep really great records. If you happen to work on a really exciting project or case, you happen to be a significant member of a deal. Make sure that you're recording that, because it's easy to forget. I can't tell you how many of our clients have trouble thinking back to remember all the things that they accomplished over their career once they get past that 5-year mark. So it's always good to make sure that you're keeping it updated and fresh. And to Amy's point earlier, there are a lot of different formats. The format that was displayed on the previous slide, in my opinion, is best geared towards a law firm or a governmental agency. There's some different approaches that you might consider or explore should you wish to go in-house.
That's a great point, Mosa. And I just lost my train of thought. So I'll I'll come back to it. But just to go over a few of the new points that are on the slide that are up right now. We've talked about the font size and the type of print, the living document. Again, going back to my very first point of just do it as you are keeping track of your information so that you can update your resume. During the interim times where you're not necessarily looking for opportunities, but want to make sure that you're remembering things, go back to that first idea of just making sure that the information is on the page. You don't have to worry about the presentation. It is more just a tracker so that you don't forget things that are important for you to reference when you are ready to be in the market. So again, just a few other points. Sometimes we see people use I or my in their resume. Start with the verb. So not I represented such and such clients, just represented, as was in that previous slide as an example. Avoid redundancies. Do not start every sentence with advised X and then the next bullet is advised Y, or drafted X and drafted Y. Vary your language. Sources are easily available. You can combine, like if you have drafted documents for financings, and then your next bullet is drafted documents for merger and acquisitions or something like that. Just combine them. There's nothing wrong with having that action verb be first and then following it with the types of things that it's relevant to. And then the last point, the no mistakes or lies, I'm going to break those down. Let's start with mistakes. Do not have mistakes on your resume. Proofread it, and proofread it again. Put it in a drawer, come back to it the next day, come back to it a few days later, have someone else look at it. An extra set of eyes will catch the things more times than not that your brain is missing because you know what you wanted to say. So always have somebody else take a look. And lies, you're certainly allowed to market, but you cannot misrepresent. You should not. You will get asked about it, and then you will have a problem. So make sure that when you are marketing your skills and your background, that it is always things that you can back up and talk about intelligently.
Just one point to piggyback on that, because I agree wholeheartedly with what Amy just advised. When you're developing your content, I think it's important to ask yourself really two questions. What was the result that was achieved, not only by you, but more likely early in your career by the team as a whole? And then make sure that you're really asking yourself the playing devil's advocate with it, with the content, which is to say, is this really important? Does this really matter to a hiring manager? If it doesn't, take it out. There's always value in giving someone some white space on your resume. It looks cleaner, and earlier in your career, it's more understandable that you will have a number of items that are of significance, and then based on the level of experience that you have, you might not necessarily need to fill 2 full pages on your resume. You might, but likely at this stage in your career, you're not filling 3 or 4 pages. So always ask yourself, is this, if you were hiring yourself, would this actually make a difference in distinguishing you from other candidates?
Which leads right into the first point on the next slide that I have up. Your audience is glancing, they are not reading. keep that in mind. When you look at your resume in 5 or 10 seconds, and 10 seconds is generous, what jumps off the page? Your education, your experience, the highlights of what you've done that you want your employer, prospective employer, to notice is what should be clear. If it seems like it's not coming across clearly, you have to work to get it to that point of clarity. The next point is to choose words that show impact. The biggest mistake I see junior attorneys make is saying supported such and such transaction, or supported litigation. Supported is a paralegal admin type word that you want to avoid. You want to contextualize what you've done, and even with due diligence, show what the impact is. And to Mosa's point about, looking at the broader effort of the team, you can bring that in and just show what your role is in a way that is more impactful. Mosa, do you have anything to add to that? I know we talked about that quite a bit.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is there's a lot of literature out there about the STAR methodology to interviewing. And if you think about the next step in your process, you're going to submit your resume. You'll hopefully lead to interviews. And when you're in the interviews, really what you're getting asked is to connect the story that you're telling the person in person to the document that helped get you there. So I think it's always important to keep in mind the results. And if you look at STAR methodology, or in my work, we call it R-STAR because we think results are the most important. But results, so the STAR stands for, S stands for situation, T stands for task, A stands for action, and R stands for result. And those are the behavioral based interview questions that you're likely to receive when you're going through your hiring process. I think it's important to make sure that your resume supports that. And the R, to Amy's point and the slide, choose your words that show impact. People hire you not to simply occupy a role and do things. They're asking you, particularly as attorneys, to achieve outcomes or results. So that's just a little more color I'd put around that. But
great, thank you. And then the next point is their pro bono and clinics count. Along the same lines, transactions that do not close, litigations that settle. I get asked all the time if things are either not paid or if they don't get to the finish line, can they be put on your resume? And the answer is absolutely. The one thing that you do need to be careful of is if it is not public and something does not close, then you cannot mention the client. You certainly can mention the industry, but legal work that you do is still experience, whether it is unpaid, whether the trial never happens. So you are, by all means, you should put any experience that you have in your skills descriptions of your resume. And with that, the next point is that if it is on the page, it is fair game. This goes usually to older experience, or if you have representative transactions or representative cases as you move along in your career. A lot of times the cases that you had when you were most junior, or maybe you had on from law school when you were in a clinic, but now you're a practicing attorney. It doesn't matter if it was, the merger of Coke and Pepsi and you had a role in it. If it was 10 years ago and your role was so small that you don't remember what it was, take it off of your resume, because you can't assume what someone is going to choose to ask you about. And again, anything that you have listed is fair game. And the other point with that is to make sure that you look at the resume that you submit. In a lot of cases, ideally, you are tweaking depending on what the position job description is, and you want to make sure that you are remembering what you told the prospective employer. If you submit a cover letter, make sure that you review the cover letter in addition to the resume. So again, you know what the person who is interviewing you is seeing. And then the last thing is to trust yourself. It is easy to be intimidated, and when you get advice, to think that that advice is the advice that you have to take. There are lots of opinions about what resumes should look like, what information should be on there. There is advice I give that I know other people give the exact opposite advice. So you have to trust yourselves. You are educated and intelligent and have good instincts. And there is not, as I said, a definite answer to these things. And so if somebody gives you advice that doesn't sound right, if you're not sure, ask a couple of other people and get their opinions. But again, I can't tell you how many times I'll see a resume and ask somebody about a particular section, and they'll say, oh, I really, somebody told me to do that. I didn't think it was really a good suggestion, but I did it anyway. Don't do that.
Yeah, just building on that, at the end of the day, it's your document, right? So if you're the type of person who wants to, present well and put your best foot forward, you're going to do things like quintuple checking your, for typos. You're going to make sure that everything on there is truthful and accurate. At the end of the day, it's your document, and it needs to put you in a position to speak confidently to a prospective employer about why they should hire you. And about how you can add value to their organization. So in doing that, if you feel confident about the document, you should approach it with a high level of confidence. And to Amy's point, it's all about trusting what you're doing.
Perfect. So we are going to move on to LinkedIn. Again, if you have questions, get them in the Q&A. There aren't any about resumes yet. You guys are all ready to go. That's awesome. But go ahead and get them in there. We're happy to circle back at the end and talk about resumes some more. So, building your LinkedIn profile.
You always want to have an action shot like Amy has.
Ideally, yes. If you don't have an action shot off the bat, you can use, first of all, LinkedIn offers colors, so you can start with that. You also can, I've seen people use the city skyline for the city they're in, something that is relevant to where you are, what you do, are perfectly fine options, but once you do have the action shot, get it in there. The other photo is super important. You want a headshot ideally. If you don't have a professional headshot, that is okay, but you do want something that looks professional. You don't want something that looks like it was from a fraternity party where somebody's clearly next to you, but kind of cut out. I've seen people who have arms around, there's no body because they have cropped it, but there's still an arm around their shoulder. Take a picture that is just you and that looks professional.
I kid you not, I had a client who came to me once and they had Darth Vader in their headshot. So that was an easy place to start.
Exactly. And for your headline, have it be something descriptive. So, as a recruiter, I do LinkedIn searches all the time. And for that search, what comes up is somebody's name and their headline. And you will make it much easier for recruiters, and law firms and companies have internal recruiters as well. So it's not just a matter of you being interested in external recruiters such as myself, but to be on the radar of the companies and law firms that you're interested in, there are internal people looking at LinkedIn all the time. You will make their life easier if you say associate at such and such firm, corporate associate, ideally M&A or finance associate or litigation associate, commercial litigation associate. I have a more descriptive headline, and certainly I would encourage you to move in that direction. But since we're talking about just getting started, you can keep it basic, and you will see lots of people who just say associate in such and such firm or such and such, or counsel at such and such company. But you do ideally want to, again, make it easy on the person who is doing a search and looking for people, if you are interested in being in the market at all. And just let them know what you do so that they will pop open your profile and take a closer look.
Yeah, the Jeff Bezos quote of what your brand is, what people say about you when you're not in the room. Well, you won't be in the room, but you will have hundreds, if not thousands of eyeballs on your profile over the course of your career. Certainly, the more active and engaged you are, it may even go north of that. So you want to make sure that you're answering the question, what is this person about, when you're developing not only your headline, but also your about section. I think it's really easy for people nowadays, maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago, it wasn't as prevalent. It wasn't used as prevalently, but I think you have a great opportunity to go out and search other profiles now and get some ideas. One other key point, if you're going to be creative in your headline, as I think Amy's profile actually does a nice job at this. She and I spent, yeah, absolutely. She and I spent, maybe 10 or 15 minutes or so talking about the delivering unicorns to top corporations and law firms. Right. It's one of those things. Obviously, she's got a very professional photo. She's displaying her part of her pedigree through, having been an attorney. But it's a jumping off point for a conversation, right? So if Amy's main purpose in using her profile is to either attract talent and or make outreach to prospective clients, it's a great question. What do you mean when you say you deliver unicorns? It's a natural jumping off point. So I've advised clients to use everything from playful, because it's their personality, things like bankruptcy nerd, to things that are perhaps a little less playful, but still beg the question, I want to know more about that person. Tell me about yourself. So my 2 comments on the profile and headline.
Great points, Mosa. And you do need to be comfortable. It took me a long time to go with the delivering unicorns. It's been great, and it is a wonderful conversation starter, but you do want to be true to you. And so while you can push your comfort zone, if being playful, as Mosa put it, is not something that you're comfortable with at all, the legal profession does tend to be conservative. And so in most cases, if you're more conservative than that, that is okay. You do want it to be a representative of who you are. And same for the about section. The about section takes that pitch that you get to make in your headline to another level. This is where you get to tell your story. Why do you do what you do? Not only what you have to offer, but the why is what you can say in this section. Unlike your resume, where I said you shouldn't use I and my, you absolutely can here. Now, again, there is a comfort level. I work with plenty of attorneys who are not comfortable with making it so personal. And it does read a little bit like a summary in a resume. And that's a decision not only for you to make, but it could also be impacted by your law firm or your company. There still are some companies that have some control over, more on the law firm side, what is presented. And sometimes if that's the case, there's nothing you really can do about that. Earlier, Mosa talked about looking around at how other people present, absolutely do that. There are so many different presentations. I've seen general counsels that have 2 lines in their about section, and it's a bunch of 2 or 3 word phrases, but they are so impactful, and they have a profile that is so clearly at a level that they don't need a big description, because who they are and what they bring is clear immediately. Then I've seen people with very long descriptions in their about section that are equally impactful. There are so many different ways to do it. If you haven't been looking around, it is a great way to get ideas and also see what resonates with you and where your comfort level is. Again, this is your online representation, and you want it to be true to who you are, so that when somebody does reach out, you're able to fill in the blanks, but there's not a mismatch. So
Yeah.
we will, unless, Melissa, do you have something to add
Yeah,
there?
just one comment, because I don't disagree with anything. In fact, I agree with everything that Amy just said. I think one thing to consider as you draft the about section, and some of it is structural, some of it is about the content. Using keywords in your about section also can help trip the algorithm in LinkedIn to have you show up higher in queue for searches from both corporations and recruiters. And you want to make sure that as you're developing your about section, you're using keywords that are representative of the types of roles that you want to have, and that demonstrate your skill sets in ways that match the jobs that you want to have. So the choice of terminology is not make or break, but it is important to give consideration to. And there are a number of different ways to structure that beyond simply paragraph form.
That's a great point. And the keyword searches are something I do all the time. And so if it is not in your headline, you do want it to be somewhere on the page, to Mosa's point. What you don't want to do is, sometimes now people get a little obsessed about whether the artificial intelligence is going to grab something, and they'll say the same thing 10 different ways to make sure that all of the words are in there. Don't get too caught up in it. You do want to be found, but you still want to come across as thoughtful and not just doing a mind dump. So the next section is the featured section. And this is a great opportunity for you to pin things to the front page of your profile. So when you do posts, they are there temporarily, but as you're commenting on things, they get pushed down. The things that you feel are important to your presentation and you want people to see, you can pin in the featured section. So if you've had a speaking engagement, if you have a speaking engagement coming up, if you've published something, written an article for a firm newsletter, for a publication, whatever it is that you would like to highlight, this is a great place for that to be. So the next section is experience. And I have everything for me that I feel somebody needs to know in my about section. And for people who do that, I think the format that I have here works, which is my titles and my history in reverse order without descriptions. There are definitely times where you might choose to have an about section that is more focused and that everything that you would like to say isn't there. You can absolutely have descriptions under your employers. Sometimes a company warrants a description. If it's not Coca-Cola and it's a startup or something that people wouldn't be familiar with, it's a public company that isn't obviously public, whatever it is, you can also do a brief description of the company in this section. The one thing I would say is you don't want it to be a copy of your resume. You put the highlights here, but again, if that information is something you incorporate into the about section, you don't need to repeat it under experience.
And just one minor nit, I think, this is a good illustration of something that you should do and something that you shouldn't do. And sometimes it's avoidable, as I'm sure is the case with preferred placement or gross and gross. But if you see how Amy has the Grayson Allen link, and it shows up, it's because Grayson Allen has a strong presence on LinkedIn and she's able to sort of capitalize on that. It has its own page on LinkedIn. You want to make sure that and this is true not just for experience, it's true for volunteer, it's true for education. LinkedIn is a really smart, sophisticated tool, right? It's a Microsoft company and it gets smarter and smarter about you the more and more you use it and the more information you convey. So, for example, if someone wants to know more about Grayson Allen and Amy's not linked here, if it's those sort of gray cube versions of the link that are there for preferred placement or gross and gross, it's not gonna pick her up, if you will. And I think all too often people leave those blank or neglect to link back to. It's not exactly a backlink, but don't connect the two. You want to be doing that for all your volunteer experience. You want to be doing that for your education, because as people go out and run searches, and let's say you're a University of Oregon alum, or you happen to have gone and volunteered for United Way in a particular city, you never know what the algorithm, I mean, it's a really complicated deal, and you can make assumptions about it, but you want to give yourself every chance to show up in the right searches, and just being smarter about the build of your profile is key. And sometimes you don't have a choice because an organization may be out or not have a LinkedIn presence anymore. But as Grayson Allen does, you want to make sure that you're doing that for your profile.
That's a great observation, Melissa. And gross and gross, just as an example, there's a father and a son in South Jersey. They never had a presence, and so there isn't something there. Preferred placement was by choice. It's still an operating search company. It's where I started, but with having my own company, I made a conscious decision there. So as long as you're thinking about it, you can make those choices, but it's a great point about having those links everywhere that you want to elevate that that experience and participation. So to Mosa's point, with education, I do have Tulane and Rutgers. I have the logos there so they can be clicked on if somebody wants to take a look at the schools and see what their pages look like. I've been at this for a while, as you see by my graduation years. So I don't have anything underneath. Certainly, meaning activities or anything like that. I think as you become more senior, your education can become, as I have it, just where you went, and we'll leave the debate about whether to have graduation years there for another time. I am a fan of being upfront about when you graduated, no matter how senior you are. But certainly at the level of what I'm assuming everyone on this Zoom is, I would put, if you're on Law Review, if you were published, if you're on any kind of journal and have any kind of leadership roles, if you're a member of Moot Court, all of those things can go under education. If you studied abroad in college, you can have that there. That's a great conversation piece. And so those are things that you can add. Anything on the education piece, Mosa?
No, I think, it used to be that you'd want to create a resume that, and Amy mentioned it earlier, that had an interest category. Nowadays, people are going to your LinkedIn profile. So if you give them an opportunity to find a common point of connection, either geographic. So if you have a New Jersey enthusiast and they want to talk about Rutgers, they can talk to Amy about that. They have a point of commonality. Similarly, if you had particular activities or accomplishments or awards that may not be germane to a particular job to which you're applying, but give someone an opportunity to have a conversation with you, I think that that's fundamental to building rapport with someone during an interview or a hiring process.
Right. Before I go on to the next slide, I did not break out all of this is the last slide on the different sections on LinkedIn. There are others. As we've both talked about, there's a volunteer section, there's accomplishments, there's licenses and certifications. There are several opportunities of skills also for you to enhance the information that is available to a reader on who is on your profile page. And so I encourage you to use all of that to paint a picture. And the prompts are easy as you scroll through. All of the other sections that I'm mentioning are there, and you go ahead and fill in everything that, again, gives people the full picture of who you are. You don't need to list everything. You absolutely can pick and choose, but by all means, use those sections to highlight what is important to you. So going back to the first page, or the first screen that I had for LinkedIn, notice the 500 plus connections. If you don't already have 500 or more connections, work to get towards that number. For whatever reason, that is the number that LinkedIn decided they were going to stop showing the number and just have 500 plus. It shows a level of engagement and that you're participating in this business marketplace. And so we're going to get to some places. If you're wondering how you can get to 500 or more, we're going to talk about that next. But that number should read exactly as it does on this page.
Yeah, and just some nuances. You could spend years studying the nuances of LinkedIn. Amy's 500 plus connections shows as blue, which means that she has an open network. If you go into the privacy settings within your LinkedIn profile, because I know there's someone out of the group of 17 on the call that may be more hesitant to be public and open about their network and may want to Amy's point, be a little bit more conservative in their presentation of self. There are tons of opportunities for you to customize the way that you show up on LinkedIn and what people can see about you. So I'd encourage you to just consider going into the privacy setting and getting it set in a way that's comfortable for you. For example, you don't necessarily, if you're currently employed somewhere, want to have an announcement going out to your network that you're updating your LinkedIn profile. You can turn off that feature on your LinkedIn privacy settings. And so while the updates will be reflected, announcements won't go out. So feel free to play around with that as you're working to build your profile as well.
That's a great point. And before we start talking about ideas for connections and how to connect a little bit, we have about 15 minutes left. Melissa and I can certainly keep talking. If you do have questions, please pop them in the Q&A so that we get to them. So your classmates, colleagues, once you start working, if you had a prior career, colleagues that you had, not only classmates in law school, go back to your college classmates, friends, relatives, opposing counsel, panelists, when you are listening into presentations that are relevant to you. You do not know who is going to be where and what your opportunities will be going forward. And so you absolutely want to take advantage of building your network and having them all in one place. It's like a Rolodex where you can keep track. For those of you, I don't know, do you still use the word Rolodex? Rolodex was a file system for keeping track of people before we had the computer. Now I've really dated myself. But anybody that you come across that you meet along the way, or you don't even have to meet them and they don't have to be a presenter, you can see a post about something that is of interest to you, and you can like or comment on that post, but you also can just reach out and say, hey, that was really interesting. I'm interested in this area, would love to keep in touch. That goes to the next point of connecting with intention, is connect with a message. You can just click on, I'd like to join your network, but it makes it so much nicer and is that first step towards building an actual connection when you put in a message that says why you're asking for someone to connect. You heard them speak, you read the post, you realized they went to the same college, they're in a practice area you're interested in, whatever it is. Now on your desktop, if you're on a regular computer, when you click connect, it will give you an opportunity to write a personal message. If you're on your phone or a tablet, if you hit connect, it just goes. You have to connect, you have to hit the 3 little dots next to that, and then it will say personalized message. So the tablets do make you take that extra step. And you can pick and choose. You don't have to connect with everyone. You don't have to accept every connection. I would encourage you to be broad in who you welcome into your network, but you are not required to accept every connection. And if you do connect with someone and they are flooding your feed, you can always mute them, or if it really seems like someone is not relevant to you, you can disconnect, and that is done quietly, meaning that they're not given a notice.
One thing to consider too is that, and I agree with creating a flexible rule. Some people will say, I don't know someone, so I don't know someone, however you define that, as I don't want to connect with them. The importance of social media is that you be social online, and it's for your benefit and for the benefit of, I would say, the greater LinkedIn community. For those sophisticated users, or for those people more familiar with LinkedIn, you'll know that a lot of the value comes not just from those that you're connected with, but most importantly from second and third degree connections. Take someone like Jeff Bezos, right? I'm probably a third degree connection of Jeff. I'm just saying Jeff because why not? If and as I learn and connect with more people at Amazon, there's a better chance that I become a second degree connection with Jeff Bezos, and more likely that I'll have an opportunity to engage in their content, more likely that I'll have an opportunity to communicate, and also more likely that they will see the same with me. So thinking about and setting some rules for the types of people that you want to connect with, in large part outside of the legal community, because those are your future clients, those are your future colleagues. You want to make sure that you're being broad and flexible in it for your benefit, and because it is a sense of community.
And that segues beautifully into the next slide, which includes how to engage in meaningful ways. And the first way is to join groups that are relevant to you. There are groups for organizations or committees that you're part of, but you also, there's no reason for you not to join groups for things that are of interest to you. You might have to tell the administrator of the group why you're interested, but there are entire conversations and opportunities come up in the group chats of LinkedIn that don't go to the broader networks. And so it is a great way for you to join practice area groups, job search groups for particular cities, lots of meaningful opportunities there. And then the other thing to do, mentioned earlier, liking or commenting, sharing somebody's post is also helpful, but is a little bit limited. LinkedIn is very big on original content. And so the problem with sharing is when content isn't original, LinkedIn tends to quash it a little bit. And so commenting is the best way uh, to elevate somebody else's post and help them push it out to more people. But get yourself in the habit of engaging in things that you think are interesting. And if it's new to you, the easiest way I think to do it is when somebody posts a new job, you can write congratulations. It is a very low-key way to just kind of get started with getting out there. Anything on the like, comment, share, Mosa?
I would say always be positive. There are
That's a
some
great point.
people,
Mhm.
and I've had the misfortune of having someone in one of my feeds go off on a tirade, not necessarily about me, but about a particular topic. So you always want to stay positive, and you also always want to stay neutral. So think about the rule of the things that you talk about in the office. LinkedIn, I think in my observation over the last really post-pandemic has become a little bit more Facebook-like in people's willingness to discuss issues that are probably outside of the types of conversations that they might have in office. Granted, the workforce is changing, but my advice to folks would be to stay away from the typical religion, sex, politics, and money. Some people do want to brand themselves in one particular camp on any number of different issues. That's certainly a choice. It's just know that as you're broadcasting who you are, you're marketing yourself in that light. So just know that for every action, there's an equal reaction, and you want to be positive and, in my opinion, agnostic on some of the more controversial subjects that are out there. So you have to decide what's comfortable for you, but once you pick a path, it's sort of out there forever.
That's a great point. So we do want to leave a few minutes for questions. I do see that one is in there. By all means, if you have any questions about resumes or about LinkedIn, get your questions in there while we take a look at what is our last slide. So we already started talking about how to engage simply and get yourself started. If you're not already going on LinkedIn every day, make it a habit, whether it's first thing in the morning or in the evening as you're winding down. It is a platform that can only help you. And so if you are not using it on a regular basis, at the very least, start going on and get comfortable with it. There are great thought leaders that you can learn from who post regularly about, we didn't even get into, there's so much on the algorithm and content and things to put out there. There is a lot of commentary that I learn every day from people who are giving pointers. A couple for you to follow are Sam McKenna and Stephanie Marone, both regularly post about updates and things, and they do make a lot of their information relevant to attorneys. And so Stephanie in particular is focused on attorney marketing. And so those are just a couple of people. There are many who, again, give great information that you can use on a daily basis as you get more and more involved in the LinkedIn community. And the point of all of this is to help you build your brand. When you submit your resume, people then go to your LinkedIn profile and look and see how you've presented, what your engagement is. It enhances who you are, or it works the other way. As we said, I regularly look for candidates on LinkedIn. Every recruiter, internal and external, does. So one way or the other, you need LinkedIn to support who you say you are and what you want your image to be. So take advantage of it, learn as much as you can, and have it enhance who you are. Any final thoughts?
No, I agree 100%.
Great. So here, I'm going to bring up our contact information and the information for the Legal Mentor Network.
We have one question I know in the chat.
Yes. So LinkedIn suggests adding 5 skills used in a particular role under the experience section. Is it better to keep these skills as keywords for your about section? Good question.
It is a good question. I'm not sure that it matters. And for me to answer that question specifically, I think what you want to do in the about section is you either want to talk about how you've used those skills and how that comprises your overall description, right? So if you are a litigator and you have, oratory skills and you have research skills and you have, drafting of memorandum skills, I think what you want to do is you want to talk about what you do. And maybe, and this again depends on the structure of how you build your about profile, you may want to use it as a standalone keyword in your about section. There's also another opportunity, as you point out, to use skills and highlight what you've done in a particular role at a particular employer. That's certainly something I would suggest you do in the experience section. So I think you can kind of double up in that respect. And then one thing that's not necessarily alluded to in the question, but something to consider is LinkedIn allows for you to use a skills, or it offers a skills section. So litigation or litigation management would certainly be 2 things that you could check the box on, if you will, in LinkedIn to be able to utilize. So it's a little hard to answer that, not knowing the specifics of how you're drafting it and how you're building your about profile. But ultimately, I think as long as the most important thing is to get it in there, and then I think whatever flows best for your reader would be my recommendation, absent more detail.
And I'm not sure, I think when somebody's doing a search, I think what you have in your about section comes up more readily than what you have checked in the skills section. So I don't see any reason why you can't have it in both, but I agree that you should have it be more descriptive in your about section. The other thing is, if you have it in skills, then people, I don't know how often people look at this, but you can have people recommend you for particular skills. So that would be a reason for you to have it there as you're building your work history. People are chiming in, basically saying, yes, I recommend this person for mergers or litigation or whatever it is. Next question, how should we respond, follow up, or take action when we receive LinkedIn messages from an HR person with suggested position to apply? So I would say always respond unless it seems like it's, a bot and it's not an actual person, which there are times that you could get something where it seems clear that it is not actually someone reaching out. But there is no harm in responding to someone who reaches out to you directly. Certainly, if it's something you're interested in, you should let the person know that and find out what the process is, if they want your resume, or what the next step is that they are asking for. If you're not interested, you can politely decline and thank them for their interest. You're not looking right now. This position, it looks like you're a litigator, but you're actually not a litigator. And so thank you for the interest. You're happy to keep in touch for future opportunities, something like that. But some kind of response can only serve you well.
I agree with everything Amy just said. I think one thing you could consider is that that's an invitation for someone to have a conversation with you. Again, assuming it's a person and not, a bot. So someone has taken the time to not only search for someone with your skills and abilities, but also to specifically target you. So and I'm predisposed to do this. So, for some of you, it may not be of interest, but I think that when you have someone make outreach, you want to try to take a call because you never know where that call could lead. I've worked with clients and in my own career have had opportunities come at me from unsuspecting sort of angles or atypical angles. And then you never know when you're going to want to connect with that person. So if there's some reason to talk to them, they're either at a company or at a firm that you're interested in, they're in an industry that you'd like to learn more about, I would take it as an opportunity, even if you're not necessarily interested in the specific job, to have a conversation to learn more. Because if you think about it, when you're going to want to be looking for a new opportunity, either in that industry, at that company, what have you, you're going to be hoping to have that conversation. So the outreach should be seen as an opportunity to start to build a relationship. And you never know who that person can connect you with. HR folks, particularly in a certain geography and or in a certain industry, tend to be a part of groups and associations and share information freely. So you never know who that person can connect you with or what you might be able to do for them.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I think probably a great point to end on. Always have the conversations because you never know. And so we want to be mindful. Oh, wait, we have one more. Let's see. Oh,
it was an anonymous thank you.
An anonymous thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us. Please connect with us. If there are any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us, and Legal Mentor Network will have more programming coming up. So if you are not following the Legal Mentor Network on LinkedIn yet, do that as well. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the future. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone.